Time to review what revolutionized zombies into horror.
One, two, three!
Hey everyone, it's Don G. Corleone here, and I am here with episode 17 of Halloween Horror Movie Reviews 3. And this episode is going to be for a black and white zombie film, because as you know, this whole video is black and white. But anyway, yeah, it's a black and white zombie movie. The first one to be directed by the legend himself, George A. Romero, rest in peace. And this was for the first installment of his Dead series. And that is 1968's Night of the Living Dead. Yeah, we're doing some pretty vintage stuff this year. Anyway, yeah. So what's the plot of this? Well, Barbara and Johnny visit their father's grave in a remote cemetery where they are suddenly set upon by zombies. Barbara manages to get away and take refuge in what seems to be an abandoned farmhouse. She is soon joined by Ben, who stopped at the house and needed gas. Beset by the walking dead all around them, Ben does his best to secure the doors and windows. News reports are grim, however, with creatures returning to life everywhere. Barbara and Ben are surprised when they realize that there are 5 people hiding out in the basement. Harry, Helen, and Karen Cooper, and a young couple, Tom and Judy. Dissensions set in almost immediately, with Harry Cooper wanting to be in charge. As their situation deteriorates, their chances of surviving the night lessen minute by minute. So yeah, how was this film made? Well, Romero embarked upon his career in the film industry while attending Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh. He directed and produced television commercials and industrial films for the Latin Image in the 1960s, a company he co-founded with friends John Russo and Russell Strainer. The trio grew bored of making commercials and wanted to film a horror movie during this period. They wanted to capitalize on the film industry's thirst for the bizarre, according to Romero. He and Strainer contacted Carl Hardem and Marilyn Estram, president and vice president respectively of a Pittsburgh-based industrial film firm called Hardman Associates Inc. They pitched their idea for a then untitled horror film. A production company conceived by Romero called Image 10 was formed that included Romero, Russell, Strainer, Hardman, and Easton. The initial budget was $6,000, with the 10 members of the production company invested $600 each for a share of the profits. Another 10 investors were found when it was found that another $6,000 was required, but this was also soon found to be inadequate. Image 10 eventually raised approximately $114,000 for the budget, which would be $888,000 today. And it was originally co-written as a horror comedy by John Russo and George A. Romero under the title Monster Flick. Another screenplay draft concept, the exploitation of adolescent aliens who visit Earth and befriend human teenagers. A second version of the script featured a young man who runs away from home and discovers rotting human corpses that aliens use for food scattered across the meadow. Russell came up with the idea that they would be recently dead only because they could not afford to bring long dead people out of their graves. He also came up with the idea that they would be flesh eaters, and a final draft written mainly by Russell during 3 days in 1967 focused on reanimated human corpses. Romero refers to them as ghouls that consume the flesh of the living. In a 1997 interview with BBC's Forbidden Weekend, Romero explained that the script developed into a 3-part short story anthology epic, and part 1 became Night of the Living Dead. Of course, sequels, Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead, were adopted from the 2 remaining unfinished parts. And then eventually, after the movie was filmed and completed, it would go on to have its theatrical premiere in Pittsburgh on October 1st, 1968. Night of the Living Dead eventually grossed $12 million domestically and $18 million internationally, earning more than 250 times its budget and making it one of the most profitable film productions ever made at the time. Released shortly prior to the adoption of the Motion Picture Association of America rating system, the film's explicit violence and gore were considered groundbreaking and unprecedented for the time, leading to widespread controversy and negative reviews upon its initial release, but it had garnered a cult following and acclaim among critics, and it appeared on lists of the greatest and most influential films ever made by such outlets like Empire, New York Times, and Total Film. Frequently identified as the first modern zombie film and a touchstone in the development of the horror genre, retrospective scholarly analysis has focused on its reflection of the social and cultural changes in the United States during the 1960s, with particular attention being directed towards the casting of Jones, an African American, in the leading role. In 1999, the film was deemed culturally, historically, or significant by the Library of Congress and selected for preservation in the National Film Registry. It even then spawned a successful franchise that included 5 official sequels, released between 1978 and 2009, all of which were also directed by Romero. The film has also inspired several remakes as a result of its public domain status. One official remake, written by Romero and directed by Tom Savini, was released in 1990 and also similarly gained a cult following, a small one. And the second one he did, the sequel, Dawn of the Dead, also got a remake in 2004 directed by Zack Snyder. As for my reaction to Night of the Living Dead, well, this is among my favorite zombie movies of all time for sure. This film is just iconic and a big landmark in horror, and for George A Romero as a director. This landmark 1968 horror shocker is a great example of what can be done with a limited budget, a simple idea, and some dedicated and talented participants. Very nicely shot, most well acted, notably grabs your attention from the very beginning to the very end, and what a classic end it is. The horror of this film is, unlike a lot of its recent descendants, less a matter of blood and gore than a matter of the real act of horror realistically depicted scenes of murder, death, and cannibalism. Though the black and white footage involved blood and gore is certainly effective, there may not be quite enough for today's average horror fan. The photography techniques of this film are innovative and powerful, showing just enough of the sheer hideousness of the film's basic concepts to disturb viewers, but not enough to allow them to detach from the film's protagonists. I don't think George A. Romero ever had it in his mind that the masterpiece he created when he made Night of the Living Dead, one of the greatest horror movies of all time, and gave birth to the zombie genre. The monster that is the zombie has been a little experimented with before this, with the film White Zombie, but never like the dark depths that George took it to. I think that this film almost never would have made it to the public since George threw it in the trunk of his car thinking nobody would ever buy it. Lo and behold, not only did the film sell, but it has one of the greatest group of fans to follow it. Such a degrading film for its time, with naked, scarred-up, chewed-up zombies eating human flesh, there is no film like Night of the Living Dead. The metaphor that we are guaranteed 2 things in life, birth and death. The slow, inevitable death as walking towards you as if you are looking at your future self is just horrific. George was way ahead of his time. That's why Night of the Living Dead still gives a lot of viewers nightmares to this day. The movie showed something that could have only occurred pre-Watergate. At one point, the people trapped in the farmhouse discover television and turn it on in search of news of what is going on. Something almost as remarkable to today's audiences as a dead rising from the graves is seen to occur. In Washington, reporters confront a government official about the situation. The government official tells the reporters the truth, and everyone believes that the government has told them. Well, then, all this would be truly remarkable in today's environment, mutual mistrust between citizens, government, and media. Also, although we don't have actual vampires as a villain here, we have a similar dilemma. As the radiation causes the dead to become animated, seek to eat the flesh of the living. Each time a victim is bitten, that victim eventually dies only to rise minutes later, seeking the flesh of the living themselves, producing a problem that grows geometrically just as vampires do. In their first 20 minutes with each other, Barbara is more scared of Ben than she is of the Gaulish army encamped outside the house. And again, Romero perfectly reflected when the racial turmoil of the time. Soon 5 other refugees from the nightmare, including Harry Cooper, join them, who typifies the average white, middle-aged, xenophobic businessman of the era, his daughter Karen, and his wife Helen, who's beginning for the first time in her life to question her husband's judgments and motives. Again, the movie speaks of deeper issues, touching the woman's liberation, and classic of all these problems, which are old money values. Later in the movie, we deal with the issue of particide. When the Cooper's daughter Karen, who previously had been bitten by a zombie before they got to the farmhouse, dies, and then comes back as one of the Walking Dead and kills and eats her mother and father after barricading themselves in the house, cabin fever soon begins to pick up the groove, inflicting more damage than ever the zombies can do, only in desperate struggle against not only the cannibalistic hordes outside, but against each other as well. And perhaps the most memorable moment in Night of the Living Dead is the ending. Romero provides a conclusion so shocking and so unexpected that the critics of the era were unsure of what to make of it. Audience reaction at the time was one of strong disbelief. Another interesting aspect of Romero's zombie methods is that no explanation of the dead rising and eating the living is ever given. In this film, it is speculated that a recent space probe returned from Venus may have caused a change due to the background radiation. Because it's important to remember the time, like, this was around the time America was in the grip of that nuclear war fever, and the danger of the radiation was on everybody's mind, but we're not getting into that details. But although the movie was made in black and white due to the tight budget, it is actually a benefit, as it adds to the atmosphere even more. The music score is also very thrilling. The top advantages of the movie is the continuous feel of being trapped in a narrowing space and the growing tension between the characters, which sets the film apart from many of its contemporaries. Too. And this movie would go on to inspire several other zombie films, not just the movies that George A. Romero later did that followed this, but quite a few others as well. Like, for example, there was, of course, 1990s, we had Brain Dead or Dead Alive, directed by Peter Jackson, one of the earlier films he did before he did Lord of the Rings. We had 28 Days Later, my second favorite zombie movie of all time. World War Z, and just among several other zombie films in this wake. But, sadly, is there any bad qualities for this film? Okay, well, maybe just one, I guess. I guess I kind of thought the random downer ending was a bit unfair, where the sole survivor emerges and then just randomly gets shot by some people outside the house. I kind of would have liked to see at least one survivor in the film, but I guess I can see what George A. Romero was going for when he did it. This ending even inspired the ending of 2002's Cabin Fever as kind of a tribute, where the sole survivor returns to the cabin, celebrates that he's the one that didn't get killed by that water flesh-eating virus, and then straight up gets shot by the police officers as he's celebrating. So that ending of that movie actually was meant to be a tribute to this ending. But I don't care about that one bad quality. What is so appealing about this film is the ability to have all these powerful underlying themes just similarly coming off as a meaningless Friday night, let's go to the drive-in B horror movie in the 60s. As the ability to let you just sit down and enjoy it without having to think too heavily about themes and good text, it's a film that can be enjoyed and appreciated by both the brainless teenagers of America and the most analytical film critics, and can be heavily enjoyed by horror fans to this day. In the end, Night of the Living Dead is the perfect zombie film and a good kickstart to the legend George A. Romero's career, and I would easily recommend it for George A. Romero and zombie film fans. Anyways, that's it for my review of Night of the Living Dead, and if you're wondering how I'm going to rank Night of the Living Dead, here's how I'm going to rank this movie. So overall, if you love zombies and George A. Romero, then I would easily give this a watch and then buy it for your DVD stall for sure, and if you're wondering how I'm going to rank Night of the Living Dead, I'm going to give Night of the Living Dead a 9 out of 10. There we go! That's it for my review of Night of the Living Dead. So we're wondering, what's going to be the next episode? Well, the next episode, we're going to be going back into Wes Craven territory. Yeah, it's another one of his bad ones. And this was not for around the 60s or 70s or the 80s era. It's during the stuff he did in the 2000s. And this was notorious for having production problems. And this movie involves werewolves, and I like to call this basically a PG-13 Scream with werewolves. Yep, guys. For those Wes Craven fans, that movie is next. Till then, that'll be it for this episode. Thank y'all for watching. And if you like this one and see more, and don't forget to like, subscribe to Don G. Corleone.